To the cryptozoology show. This show here, we're gonna do some different topics. I got a couple of Sasquatch films that are likely real. A walking fish and other damn cryptids. I covered this a little bit in another thing, but I had so many stories, and I've been collecting these since a little kid, right? So they're an interesting thing that's out there that we'll talk about, and that there's even though the most explanations, including from myself, most of the time is a type of a salamander that is causing this sort of people to believe this, but a lot of these sightings and these tales, and including one from just even a couple of years ago, there's something wrong here where it seemingly this is not the case, right? We have a hilarious, and I mean hilarious, I'd forgotten about this story, that these French two young ladies I don't know, they were real close buddies, let's say, right? And this crazy guy that they'd hang out with, named Bob, were down at a Minx Lake many moons ago. This would have been, in the earlier 2000 range, like maybe mid 2000. Somewhere it's like quite a few years back, anyways, right? So they probably about mid 2000 or so, and they had an encounter down there with something that's pretty hilarious. so, so anyways, we'll talk about that one as well, right? And that sort of thing like that, and some interesting killings and different things that were occurred in early times in Quebec that was blamed on loup de gros, sort of things like that, and so very interesting, anyways. And but to show that this is feasible, what some of these sort of things there, that werewolves may have actually some background in numerous ways. They're not just one thing that causes a werewolf, right? So, and that, but there's definitely some background to why people believe these things, right? And that sort of thing like that. So we'll cover that and some other sort of things. So, um, and that, and in further shows, like I said, I'll be covering a lot of cryptid cats and some other ones, including one from my area that no other cryptozoologists heard of, and things like that. And also, I didn't have room to put this in here, but I have a brand new cryptid that nobody on Earth has ever heard of. I talked to the direct witness and some other witnesses that had family members even that have seen this thing, right? That the group there in Nunavut do not actually even have a name for the monster because he's a newer phenomena. None of them have ever seen this thing before until about 2020, right? So I have an exclusive interview that I did with this Nunavut lady. That lives in a remote village in Nunavut, that, of a fascinating cryptid that I've never. I mean, I'm really well researched in these things, and these people don't even have a name for it, right? So I'm the first person in the world that's ever telling about this cryptid, right? So, so we'll be talking about that as well, and also an interesting correlation with this beast of Jovada, and that. And a modern killing in very recent times, not that long ago, that shows that this is feasible here, that this may have been the culprit in older times of these shoot dogs, and some kind of a crossbreed here, possibly with a hyena and things like that. So we'll be discussing this modern thing that just occurred there. A guy shot a seemingly hyena and some other creature mixture here, right? And that sort of thing like that. And this thing certainly could do all of that sort of stuff. And hyenas are known to rip people to shreds, right? And even go right into villages and attack somebody, right? So I mean, they're not they're very intelligent and very sociable sort of creature with their own kind. And there has been cases where people raised them and they were really good with them and that sort of thing like that. But in general, you know what I mean? They're not out to for you to stick your hand out the car door and start petting them. It's not probably a good idea. So anyways, so we have some different ones to cover about that sort of thing like that. And I wanted to talk about some of my walking fish stories from my local region here that I didn't get a chance to cover that much. I had covered the subject a little bit before, but I have some other things here and some other strange dam cryptids that you get these stories like all over the place in dams, right? Of these monsters, right? And that sort of thing like that, and including my own personal experiences a few times and things like that. So, anyways, we got a different search of shows, but the first film that I want to cover, I believe in every way, shape, or form that this is not a guy in a suit. Uh, I've analyzed this film multi times over, and I look at all the odds and the probability of each sort of thing occurring. And even though it's not as convincing as, let's say, the Patterson film or the Russian film, simply because nobody can cover a football field within seconds like that. Nobody could do that. No runner on earth or anybody, especially half the time when you're on all fours, right? Like, not happening, right? So that was a true wild ape man of some sort, right? Elma, whatever, right? Like this, I don't know, mink, whatever, a wayward, abominable snowman, all the same stuff, right? It's a Russian Yeti, right? Like sort of thing, right? So, but whichever one they are, I believe there's several of these kinds, right? And some are smaller, some are bigger. Some seem to have all had like more yellowish like fur. Some are darker. Like there's all these, there's variations here that, you know what I mean? They're similar. They're all a Bigfoot thing. And the reason why they all escape is because they all have the same abilities and think the same. And they're very close. They're all the same kind of thing. They all came from each other somehow, but through isolation and genetics and that. Some are bigger, some are smaller, some are different things, right? So, anyways, we got an interesting show there to cover. So, we'll continue. Before I show you the film, we're just going to be commenting about a real recent film that was taken from a tourist younger fellow from Florida, took from a train in Colorado. And this state has like sightings for centuries back. It has native traditions and all that. So, a well known state to have a lot of Bigfoot stuff going on, right? And this guy's out here. He's an official Bigfoot hunter here. So, he's looking for reports too. And this sort of thing like that. But um, it's very rare that most films, 99 point some percent, are completely hoaxes, right? However, occasionally, like the Patterson film, the film from Russia, which I've told you is fully, and I don't care what anybody claims, they can claim all they want. You can, I'd love to be a zillionaire to bring a bunch of Joe Nichols with me and let them see them do this, right? They're not going to do it. Nobody can do it. You cannot run on two legs to all fours most of the time and jump 20, 30 feet in a crack here every second and clear a football field in like seconds, right? It can't be done. You know it. I know it. Any person with a brain that's ever watched like Olympic guys and stuff, these people look like a snail compared to that dude on that film. It's real, right? So that was a mink and Elma, whatever, right? Yeti guy of some sort, right? Like whatever version, right? But anyways, he certainly one, and I don't know why the Bigfoot guys don't talk about it. It's more convincing than the Patterson film because you cannot do that no matter what. The guy would have to know every terrain and on all the little holes, the logs. You could see there was trees spewing all over the place, right? Totally, how anybody even disputes that film is ridiculous. It's a kid and an old man from Russia with no cash, and they just heard this crack. You hear it on the film, so the guys started blabbing, and they see this thing, right? And I mean, it was there and it was real. Right? And that really is a skunk ape, like the similar like reports in Florida and other places. I've seen probably several hundred over the years, at least bare minimum, of Sasquatch with strange older fur on them or gray, like a stripe or different things mentioned in different ones, right? So this is just a sign of old age. And can you imagine that dude could still fly like that and he's an older one, right? So I don't even see how anybody, after, if you analyze the Patterson film, and like I showed you, the quintessential evidence that rarely anybody talks about much is a film that was done separately right after with Roger doing the tracks, like to take pictures of them and all that. And you can clearly see he can't even sink in the ground. So the person that, if it was somebody in a suit, had to somehow have like, 500 to 1,000 pounds or some kind of range of weights on them, and who could walk fluidly like that, and where would you hide all this? Come on, I mean, really, right? Like, so no matter what any people claim, a suit, this, that, and all this stuff, none of these people can prove a dime. But no human being on this freaking planet could sink in those depths and be able to walk that speed and fluidly like that in a suit, especially in the 60s, right? And this film that we're going to see here, I believe to be authentic because of multi reasons, that the odds of it as a stage hoax or a setup or any of that is extremely low. So the problem with this film is it's so friggin' short. It's extremely short. Okay, that this makes it a problem to even comment and keep showing and things like that. So, but I want you, the main things that we want to look at here, look at the length of the creature's arms, look at how great apes behave, primitive great apes like a gorilla and stuff like that, right? When they feel threatened or, concerned, let's say, right, of some sort, and that kind of stuff, how they do with their arms and things. And you'll clearly see that the odds of this guy, like, in today's time, in the 60s, I would have fought for the film even 100 times more, right? But if it was done then, but because today there's these things, right? Like it's a little bit better stuff here, but because of all the following up to seeing the creature, is amazing sort of arm lengths and different things about it, and a look of concern. And I also get off of it like I do the Patterson film and the Great Ape film from Russia. That something tells me, no matter what, that that's a real living creature of some sort, like half human ape man, whatever the hell these things are, right at the end of the day. Like I told you, there's a lot of explanations for, guaranteed. Some of them are just feral cave like people that, you know what I mean, fit in the Bigfoot like phenomena. There's ancient giant ones that seem to be like this, like a Neanderthalish man, like sort of Alma like thing, as some of them, right? But then there's this more gigantopithecus gorilla like guys that, if they are humans, are really like more chipmanish, right? And even more macho and everything, right? So you got that gang, and you got like small ones, mediums, and large, right? And then super giants, right? Like 15, 20 foot ancient ones that almost no places report them anymore, except like the Solomon Islands and a few handful of areas around the world, but not much, right? Like not compared to in ancient times, right? But this film has a lot of extraordinary things going for it, even though it's very short. This guy actually was, for a change, everybody says, oh, everybody, they always blurry. How come the film's always blurry? This guy actually gets us to pretty crystal clear for what was capable of a camera like that from a train, right? And I'm telling you that I feel that that was a real ape man, like a more of the, there's about 30% of Sasquatch are tall, skinny guys. They're not as big, right? Like muscular. Like even though that guy, I'm sure, would be able to give you one swat and bust your head right off, right? Like I carry it like even a skinnier one, right? But because they're different than us in this way, right? Like you're living out in that jungle stuff 24/7, right? And that sort of thing like that. But the thing is that this guy might have never seen a train before, or just got concerned for something, or just senses, right, and that, and was quite concerned about this. And I feel that right off of the film, this is not a guy in a suit. I just, everything about it matches up. The witness, how it all occurred, all the stuff, the odds of some guy hiking in the mountains to wait for some people to come by in the hopes that one of them got a camera to, fool the world with a big fake Bigfoot film when he's not going to get any money from it. You see what I mean? Like there's a lot of things, problems with this, right? And that sort of thing like that. But the thing is, this is another legitimate film here, and every year there's always now seemingly one or two that are pretty bloody convincing, right? Like I've told you before, I also believe in the highest probability that the Creek Crosser one is a real ape man, and also the Whitey guy, just because there's no humans that could have gotten in a suit that is 10 feet tall. Like, really, where are you going to find an actor like this? And guaranteed, this guy's got to be around this region. Like, there's no way that he's under late 8 foot, like sort of thing, because he's the cow. When he goes by him, the cow is like only at around his waist, man. And these are big cows, right? And I mean, I've been around cows, and they're, you know what I mean. Like he would have to be at least that sort of height, right? Like 5 feet or so, or whatever, right? So if you add that now, and this is only at this guy's waist, right? There's no, this dude is, and there's no guy that could not likely run like that in a suit and stuff. So I even though blur, it's one of the most blurriest, shitty films you could ever get in a lot of ways, right? And that sort of thing like that. It does have that feature to it that I find very improbable, those two things, the height of it, and that the way that this guy can fly up a hill like that. An actor in a suit. Like, how do you get an actor in a suit and a 10-foot suit that somehow you stand in it and now you can run on it? But you're not, your feet really aren't on the ground. You got an extension there for bit. Like, you see what I mean? It's not all right. And these are shitty cameras that's in this area where this guy has gotten about 3, 4 different Bigfoot that have ran across on his property, right? At certain times of day and stuff. And there seems to be a little group of them there, right? And that sort of thing like that. There's another fascinating one that I saw that I know. I've worked on those things, so I fucking know. Like, oop, beep, beep, beep. I know that you have to stand up on these things to even get up to that box thing. There's like these little stair things, right? Like on some big rigs and stuff like that kind of thing, right? So you see in the picture this Bigfoot walk by this guy in a tractor, and this Bigfoot is like at least at this guy's height of his head inside the tractor. So yeah, where can you find an actor that fluid to walk across of corn, like some farmer's field towards a barn, right? And Bigfoot are known to do this. They like barns. There's actually, I've probably collected like several dozen over the ages. Like one in Oklahoma, an actual in the 1800s. They shot this a Bigfoot in a barn, right, and they killed him. And but nobody knows whatever happened to him and stuff like that. But they shot him inside this barn, right, and that sort of thing like that. So there's a lot of strange things where these guys vanish, right, because they would always give an excuse that it must have been some
wild hermit that was wanted by the police or things like that. And they'd always give the same description when they catch these guys. They're like bare minimum 6 foot something to over 10 feet tall. One oh, it's this bay there, right? Uh, and they actually have really good drawings of them and everything, and talk about how they were able to tame this guy Albert. So again, like I said, some of these got to be pretty humanish like in a certain ways, right? And I showed you the caveman from Morocco, and conveniently the other fellow, the Iran monster guy, right? Both of these, the family claims that the mother was raped by a caveman, right? Like, come on, I mean, really, right? And conveniently, they both turn out like one of these guys that the scientist claims is some ancient relative of us from 50,000 years ago, and all this BS, right? This stuff that they find, right? They're just variants of humans because of the terrain that they're living in. They change, right? So, and it probably doesn't take like ages, right? And that kind of thing like that. But this guy here is the normal, what I'd say, like BC, like giant, skinnier Bigfoot version, right? You get, like I said, a certain amount of these guys that are like this, where he's not like very skinny. I mean, he's certainly way bigger than a typical human would be, and that sort of thing. But he's lanky guy, right? He's not as muscular macho as this guy down here, right? But anyways, we'll look at the film, and I'm telling you, there's something about it. Um, no, like the only way that I'm gonna give it like a 90 to 95% that it cannot be a person in a suit, but I'll give the five because of today's times. They've gotten better at this. There's more trickery. There's more CGI. There's this, that, and all this stuff. But this isn't like this, and this is an authentic film. So if it was a person in a suit, then that would mean that they'd have to be in cooperation with this other guy who happens to be traveling by himself. So now you have to have another person that they don't know that you're traveling with to meet up for this scheme. And somehow this guy's got to be crazy enough in killer bear territory and everything else, right? God knows what you'll run across is going there. There's also rednecks and loon tunes that'll shoot you on sight, right? This kind of stuff. I mean, I've seen it down there myself, right? So I know, I mean, these things can occur, right? So I doubt really that this guy has the ability to climb up a mountain, get this amazing suit, and you see a concern on the creature's face. He changes and he hunkers down there, and his arms are incredibly, and he moves his hands. So that would mean if you did have an extension, it had to be like some robotic thing. This is a lot of cash here for. Nothing when really it's only this guy that's gotten a few interviews. So what, he made a few dollars from ABC. That doesn't make you fake or anything, right? I would do the same thing. I mean, if I got this monster film, right, and they offer me to put it on their show and they want to pay you, well, yeah, why wouldn't you, right? Like, I mean, that doesn't make it fake or anything, right? It's just normal common sense. Why should they get your film and everybody, half the population, say, "Oh, you're a faker," and all this kind of stuff that you got to go through, right? Like for some people, right? And that, so I can't see it really, right? Right? Like so. Anyways, I believe this to be the legitimate deal and one of the rare. There's probably about now 10 Bigfoot films that I've seen that I would say 4 or 5 of them are fully impossible that it's a human in a suit, right? And that, especially the Patterson and the Russian film, right? But there's also a Yowie one that I really doubt is a person in a suit for different reasons, right? And that, but he's a different phenomena, but the same Bigfoot, like some primitive oh, ape rock man, right? Sort of thing, right? And they all do the same thing. They chuck rocks at you. They get upset, goody goo goo. Like these are the real kind of Bigfoot. Like the bigger ones that probably are seen more simply because maybe not a population thing, just simply they're bigger, right? And they may hang out in areas that other people like. I mean, you're gonna a Bigfoot needs water, right, to drink, like any human does or animals, right? So of course they go to rivers and stuff, but so does 10 million fishermen and hikers and all kinds of people that like looking at water, swimming, or all that. So they go in the same kinds of places where you'd more likely see, but a 4 foot little Bigfoot guy hiding up in a tree is much harder to find. That's another film I'm going to comment on another show. There's an excellent one where these two ladies find this little Bigfoot guy and he's up in this tree, kind of pretend that he's not there. And it's pretty convincing. I really, I can't see why that these women would go through like, and then you had to get some kid in a suit with a really cool, muscular, like great apish like suit here and everything for what, right? Like so. I doubt it too. Again, right? It's another film that's probably legitimate, but this one here. I'm telling you, is in the highest probability a real legitimate film. So the skeptics that use some of these, they are coming out. There's occasionally somebody out there that gets lucky with one of these and actually gets something real decent on film that you can debate, and this is certainly one of them. Another one, even though it's far off, there's this real character guy. What's his name? Thinker or something or other. And I've seen a few of his shows. He's very entertaining, and he's like me. He analyzes every little bits of these things, right? But he has a good voice and a sort of good following on there. But he covers the one there. Where I was at Yellowstone National Park before, right? And I interviewed this warden that saw, yeah, you know what I mean, this seal, and there's like a sea monster that was in there in early days, maybe exists or not. Nowadays, I've not seen a report in ages, but at one time there was seals that used to live in Yellowstone Lake somehow, right, and things like that. But anyways, and these Bigfoot stories, right, of these Bigfoot guys that would live around there, but sort of thing. But uh, there's three of them that was taken from some long range camera, right? That's some kind of thing that they set up there to monitor animal wildlife. And you can clearly see the height of these creatures going by compared. There was, I think, three of them or three or four of them. Yeah, there's one guy in the front, then, but you see like a line of three. So I'm not, I think there was like three of them, anyways, at least. And I haven't seen it in a while. And the smallest guy was actually the leader, and the tallest one was at the back end, right? But there's no way this tallest last guy couldn't be under 8 foot something. He has to be this big. Like, I mean, this guy makes these giant bison that you don't mess with, right? Look like not like small compared, you know, like they look like they're only about half the height of this dude, right? So, I mean, and that's a wild sort of another film that I, I mean, where are you going to find some actors that conveniently? There's no roads there for ages, right? There's no nothing. So before this camera even picked them up, they would have had to walk massive miles here through God knows what kind of snow. And then you got these geysers that are hidden all over the place that could come flying up and zap you and barbecue Bigfoot, right? So, I mean, if you analyze these things about it, right, like the odds of where would you find three or four actors here that are 7 to 9 foot tall, sort of idea, right? Like, I mean, where would you get that? Like, I mean, it's hard enough to find one that would even be 7 feet tall, right? Let alone, a group here, right? So I find that film convincing for those reasons, right? And that sort of thing, and the size of it compared to the bison that are out there, right? So Yellowstone National Park there has a lot of strange stuff that goes on in there, from old sea monster stuff to yeah, you got Bigfooted and a werewolf like thing a few times, and other wacky stuff all mixed in there, right? Like so, and alien like people that might live underground and other weird stuff, right? So it's a strange park. But anyway, we'll go on about this film here, and I just wanted to cover it because to me it's convincing. I believe it. This guy authentically just by was on the train at the right time, the right place, and he got a very pretty clear bloody film here. And I really doubt that this is a guy in a suit. So, anyways, we'll cover that next.
Hey, folks, I wanted to comment about this Bigfoot sighting in Colorado. This guy was on a train, and two people actually noticed this. Then he steadied the camera and actually did a good job. Now, I believe this to be an actual authentic Sasquatch film. It's not the odds of this being set up. It's on a remote train. There's nobody around. The monsters up on a hill as usual. And I want to comment some things on there. There's that silly guy Jack or something. Right? So here was the witness, right? And this guy was trying to keep it steady and things like that. And this couple noticed the Bigfoot monster, and then away he went, right? Sort of thing. So the this is another film that I've commented on before. I don't believe also that that's a human walking up that hill. I highly doubt this. However, this I really doubt. I'd put this up near around in the Patterson sort of film here, and sort of thing like that, right? So, and I'll explain why. Is that if you look at the length of the arms of this guy, right, and that sort of thing like that, right, and sadly, well, I don't know what happened here. That's a shame. But what we'll do is if you look at this guy very carefully, right, his arm length is past those knees pretty well, and he actually looks concerned. He may have never even seen a train in his life. I don't believe that the like this would take a lot of setup. You have to hope that the train's going to come by on time. You got to get some guy away from any roads and all this sort of stuff like this to happen to be waiting for them in the hopes that somebody here will have a camera. The other people didn't have anything and they just started yelling, "Hey, look, it's a giant man." And then this guy just got it, started steadying and doing it, right? And that sort of thing like that. So if you think about that, right? Like, I mean, the odds of this is so crazy, man. Like, I mean, totally not feasible here that this is a guy in a suit in a lot of ways. I really doubt this, right? So we'll have to cut this part out, but I really doubt this for multi reasons here. The train was going by. There's something really natural about the face of this guy, and that sort of thing like that. So, and this guy looks to be like, some regular character and not a big whopper teller sort of thing, right? So I just want to he comment. He does what I call a gorilla-like behavior. He actually does the arms when they feel threatened and stuff like that. They'll do this sort of chest-like thing, right? And that even though it's you don't see the muscle definition as much as you could in the Patterson film or that. Uh, every indication on this planet, the way that the creature's leg movements are, and his extreme long arms, the fluidity of how he moves and how he moves his arms, I really doubt that's an extension there. I also doubt that some guy's gonna be all in this wild ghillie suit. That's a really good one if it is one, and then this guy would have to be extremely tall. The suit quality is actually, even though it's not as muscular as some. You have to remember a lot of Sasquatch reports are like this, where the guy's a little bit on the thinner side, right? This is definitely a male. I don't believe this to be a female, not in this kind of the figure that it has. It's much more acting and looking like a male to me, like 99.999, sort of thing, right? Like that. You don't see any big breasts or anything like that. So definitely this is a male. Males do look different than the female Sasquatches. They're not as wide sometimes. It all depends on the terrain and many things, right? Just like any other sort of thing, right? Like where people have natural genes in them, and some is going to become a monster and others aren't, right? But this guy is the legitimate deal for the fluidity that he walks. It's way out in the mountainous wilderness. I've been out in BC, out in these train like stuff. I mean, it's wild, man. There's nothing there. There's no people. There's the odd highway that they cut through, and people get this imagination that, oh, wow, they must discover everything. They don't know anything on either side of it. Nobody comes to these places. Nobody does anything here. They're not near anything, really, right? So, this is the habitat of a creature like this, right? And this guy is like a true ape like sort of, not a feral human here. This is the giant Sasquatch version, right? The typical ones that are seen the most out of any of the sorts. Simply, I imagine, because of their size, and a lot of people like this kinds of wilderness and that, and when you're looking far off, there's always a mountain and a valley below you somewhere. One of these guys might be floating around, right? And that sort of thing like that. But anyways, this is extremely convincing. Extremely. I cannot imagine that that's a guy in a suit. You have to remember it's in a wilderness area. It's a train going by. The guy didn't even know anything about it, and it's two other people yelling to him, "Quick, start filming," sort of idea, right? And the fluidity of and the length of the arms, the creature's movement, everything is more like some wild, ancient human to chimp man here that is concerned and was concerned about this train and what's going on, right? And that sort of thing like that. So I will not give it as high, only because it's feasible that in today's time you could have a suit that would be in this sort of quality, right? It's feasible, but the odds of the rest of the things and the way that this guy moves and the way that he does his chip thing and his extremely long arms, even if you had extra arms sort of added to it, this is too fluid, too beautiful. It's like a solid connection here, right? Like whatever's doing that, this guy's moving his hands and his feet and doing all this stuff, right? And I don't see any evidence of a neck there whatsoever. It looks like it's sitting right on his shoulders there. He does have a pointed cranium, and some Bigfoot are much more hairy than the next, right? And that sort of thing like that. So I'd say that this, like, I mean, and here this guy lives in skunk ape territory, right? But he doesn't see one there. Maybe I don't know if he ever did, but I mean, nevertheless, yeah, the whole thing adds up. Like, I mean, if you had to think about it, you got a couple of tours that make him aware. He films it. What's the odds that some guy in a ghillie suit is hoping up in a mountain that somebody's going to come by for what? He's not going to make any money out of it. So the only way this would occur is that he was in cahoots with somebody on here, but then that would have to be that guy. And this guy comes from Florida, right? So then he would have had to have a buddy that isn't known to be traveling with him. He's traveling by himself, right? You see what I mean? Like there's all these things you would have to factor in to do this. I just doubt it, right? So I'm going to give this in my top five Bigfoot films of all time that I believe to be 100% authentic. I'm not even going to say 99. I really doubt in any possible way this is a guy in a suit. And the length of this guy's arms and the size of his feet and the other things about him, even though he's a bit suitish looking with because some Bigfoot are like that. A certain amount of them are just super hairy, and so you don't see their muscular definitions as much as you do like on the Patterson film or some of the other ones, the Wild Man of Russia there that I showed you is impossible. There's no way guys can leap 15, 25, 30 feet in a crack here and poop, pip, pip, pap, pip, pip, like this and be across a football field in like 4 seconds. It's not happening, man. So I mean, only a wild great ape human of some sort could do such a thing, right? And so this one, sadly, because the guy's just walking up a hill, right? You can use some of these. This one, a skeptic could have a bit of a better ground on it because you could just the skeptic can't prove it's a guy in a suit, and but the other people can't really prove that that's a guy not in a suit, because you can argue about any feature of it, right? But all I'm saying is this: there's something about the way that this guy looks. He does this chipman thing that's not like a guy pretending he's a gorilla. It seemed to me natural. Everything is natural about this. The guy's a tourist from Florida. I mean, the odds of all this occurring and you had this all set up for what to make a few dollars, right? It's not happening in my mind. I just don't really believe this, right? So there's only one other logical conclusion that it really is a Sasquatch, right? And congratulations to him. He's one of the few that really, in the highest probability, really did see one, and he really filmed right? And so I gotta stick up for this guy. I everything about it, even my when I look at it, I get this vibe like I do like the Patterson film and the Russian film. There's something about the guy's eyes and his face and how he looks concerned, and he does that gorilla like don't mess with me shit like sort of movements there and his massively long arms way bigger than a guy in a suit could have and other things it's too much plus and no negative that I can find, except that you could say somebody could design a suit similar to that. I agree with that. However, you wouldn't be able to get the arm length like that so natural unless you actually had some kind of robotic arms here. And then you're talking gazillions of bucks here for the suit when it's a tourist guy from Florida. So again, you'd have to be in cahoots with him the only way, right? So I mean, to set all this up and everything, it sounds right out there. Why would you even bother when everybody would believe the Florida skunk ape is reported just as much, almost as BC ones in the rest of the West, right? They're almost equal, I would say, like nearly. You have from Georgia to South Carolina, North Carolina, all of those, and every other state too. But I mean, especially those southern ones, right? This Florida skunk ape phenomena, they're slightly different. They're smaller guys usually, and more stinky, more furry, and more ape-like, like very apish, not humanish, barely at all, right? Sort of thing, except some ancient giant reports that these guys probably don't exist anymore. You don't hear any tales really of anything over about 8, 9 feet tall, right? Sort of thing like that, So you got to keep in mind all the things about it that the guy didn't even know and didn't wasn't doing anything with his camera until other tourists saw the Bigfoot monster, right? You see what I mean? Like so, it adds up way more likely that this guy really did actually film a Sasquatch. So congratulations to that young man. Absolutely amazing. I'm surprised it's got this lesser amount of views, right? 634,000 is, I'll never see that on any of my shows. but the thing is that this this film is should be put in with the more probable it's real than not, right? So I'll cover a couple more here that I've seen that in recent times. So the good thing is that even though people are complaining about blurry this and that, this guy was actually smart enough to stabilize this, and he did it correctly. And you actually, from the distance that this guy is and everything, you can actually tell a lot about this. And
highly likely it's not a guy in a suit for multi reasons, right? Like I said, right? Like, I mean, there's no highway right there where for him to, there's no cars anywhere parked, right? So how did this guy get there? And oh, you see what I mean? Like the whole, there's a lot of weirdness there that, and if you ever notice all these ages that people say, oh, this film, it's a guy in a ghillie suit, this and that. Uh, there's none of these people are around. Like, you don't see the guy come out and say, here's my suit, right? You don't ever see this because they know that they weren't the person they are, right? And that sort of thing like that. And the only people that have tried that is with the Patterson film because they were trying getting paid big bucks by this magazine to say this sort of stuff, right? And that, but with a ridiculous old gorilla suit that doesn't match the Patterson film at all, below zero in any way, shape, or form. And the guy didn't even know where the place was that it was filmed. So, I mean, if you made the suit and did the film and you were the person in the suit, well, then you should know where the place was, right? I would think, right? Like, I mean, so, I mean, anyways, this is another, a very convincing, very, very, very convincing Sasquatch film to me. Yeah, I'm putting it right up there in the top five of all times, right? So even though some people had problems with some of these guys, right, like and that, but of course the Patterson film to me is not disputable. The weight of it, the everything is does it all, right? Like you answer every sort of critic thing that they can say, right? And that the same with the guy from Russia. It is impossible. I challenge anybody on this planet. I wish I was a mass billionaire. I would love to challenge them. I wouldn't care if I lost 50 million. If they could do it, then yeah, you know, great stuff. But it's not happening. You are not going to get a guy in some suit and be able to leap a football field, jumping and running on all fours in 4 or 5 seconds. Here, you know it, I know it. Any person in the planet with a brain knows this, right? It's not happening, right? So that was not a guy in a suit, right? So therefore, there's only one other logical conclusion that yes, a mink like abominable snowman like sort of guy exists out in Russia, and obviously a Sasquatch like guys exist here and in many places worldwide. They're wild humans and some kind of few great ape like creatures of some sort that is all mixed in with this. As far as I know, maybe it's impossible to mate with one or the other. Who knows, right? Like, so I mean, these things might have happened because even scientists say that with the imaginary Neanderthal man, that they find these things now that Neanderthals were mixing with them and things like that, but they went extinct. But all this stuff is just mass, lunacy. Uh, Wherever a culture is, the heads, your skin color, all kinds of things are going to adapt to the, you know what I mean, the environment around you, right? So in early times when you got cave people and stuff like that, you had to be more macho and stuff like that. So the head was thicker and certain stuff like that. And maybe originally that sort of thing like that. People the intelligent Adam and Eve, when they had offspring and that, some of them got too big of groups. They run off into the woods and the forest. Some end up being caveman like people, and they start developing these kinds of things, right? But they've all been here since time began. They're still here. That's a wild ape man of some sort, Gigantopithecus human of some sort, right? Like whatever they are, right? You know, like I suspect that there's several kinds of these things for sure. There's wild, giant, feral humans that fit 100% in the Bigfoot sort of category, right? You have these giant Nephilim like guys like this dude here. They're usually even more furry and more apish like even more stuff, right? And then you actually have like a lot of reports that are very similar to a gorilla or that sort of thing, right? Like that and that. So, but anyways, this is an astonishing good film. It really is. It's got a lot going for it, and that sort of thing like that.
We'll see here if we can. Are they going to show it again? But I mean, if you look at this witness rear and this one too, I mean, I really doubt that's a guy walking. You know, it's hard to know. But that see his arms, the length is extraordinary, folks. The length is extraordinary, right? Like so. I mean, there is something about this guy here. If we could get, if you look at the length of his arms, they're astonishing, astonishing, right? And the way that he does this chimp ape like sort of pose and stuff like that. I mean, what can I say? Anyways, I believe this to be authentic. I mean, it all adds up in multi ways, right? If you think about it, right? So, congratulations to this guy. I'm jealous. I never got to see the Queo monster. My buddy sure did, but I certainly heard him and saw the branches and the stuff that this guy ripped off with his bare hands, like 8, 9, 10 feet up in the air, stuff going on, and this guy mowed through this stuff. This is like that's why they can do shit like that. So even if the guy's like 7 or 8 feet tall, he probably can reach like 11, 12 feet or something. Who knows, right? Like however it would work. But I mean, this guy's got way longer arms than any human being. Like when I put my arm down here, right? I'm not even remotely, and I mean not even remotely near my knees. I mean not remotely, like another good foot there or so, right? So this guy is past there and he's like and he's just got bent arms. Like I mean, so ridiculous stuff. There's no way that is a guy in a suit in the highest probability. Unless they the only thing is today you might be able to do some of this stuff. If this film was done 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I would argue to the ends of the earth that it's impossible. It's a guy in a suit. But because of today's abilities of some of the stuff, but I still say the fluidity of the guy's arms, the way that he moves them, is very unlikely that he's got an extra attachment there of some sort. It's all very fluid, very natural, great stuff. Congratulations to him. He got himself a real Sasquatch on film. I wanted to talk next there a little bit about the St. Lawrence River monster. Myself personally, I had several times over past decades here. Once in the late 60s, another time in the early 80s, and then one around 2000 and some. The last one I was with a lady, and we were fishing for carp on the around what's it, Morrisburg, Ontario, and we were standing there just watching out, and it was quiet and everything. And this titanic shadow that was shaped like some kind of shark-like creature. If it was a sturgeon, it was the biggest sturgeon that ever. Like I mean, insane stuff here because whatever this thing was at least about 5 times taller than the marker buoys they had out there, and I presume they would be at least 4 to 5 feet tall in this sort of range. So, you're talking a 20 foot plus creature. So it could have been a Greenland shark, possibly. It could have been a giant sturgeon. Uh, or some wayward other sort of monster fish that got in, some other kind of shark of some sort or whatever, right? Like something like that. But whatever this thing was, he was titanic. And I mean, absolutely 20 foot plus for sure. Sort of a monster here and extremely wide, but he had big fins up in the front and you could see shadow up in the back and some kind of fin like thing. But this thing was underneath the water, always deep and just going around this island, whatever it was, right? And I mean, people have even caught like a flounder in there, like a lot of strange stuff, eh? That saltwater fish occasionally will get up and go further into that and that sort of thing like that. So that's an experience that I had with some, but I was with these kids once and we saw something really strange around the same area around Mooresburg, but like decades previous to that sort of thing. And I had them out fall fishing for like it was really breezing, like in November sort of thing, right? And we were all bundled up and stuff like that, and sort of almost like what you'd call the technique of dead sticking and that sort of thing like that, using anything from a Lindy rig, like sort of a presentation of sliding slip sinker sort of thing, and to like homemade jigs that I was making and things like that. You just drag it along the bottom and let it sit there for a little bit and give it a couple of shakes. And sometimes a big smallie would nail it, and they would come up in these areas around that time of year, right? And that sort of thing like that. And we were watching out there, and this thing was making a big shadow, was, and even though it was a little bit wavy out, it was a solid thing. And I don't think it was a fish, because it would look like it was going up and down, like more like a whale like sort of thing, right? And that, and I was on this another time on the St. Lawrence River on a tour boat, and actually a bunch of us seen this big shadow going underneath the water that crossed this area, right, around the Thousand Islands and that, right? So I there's enough out there for me. Plus, I believe I hooked a Greenland shark in the St. Lawrence. I didn't know that there was Greenland sharks or any kind of sharks in the St. Lawrence at that point. I'd never seen one newspaper article ever about it. I collected them from many other places, from the Black River, New York, to all over the United States, and some in Canada and things like that, and over in England, the Thames River and different ones, right? But at that point, I was a younger guy, and I hadn't seen this information yet, just a few sea monster stories and things like that, right? So there's been that kind on there. If you talk to some of the native groups around there, they'll tell you that, in ancient days, they'd see them more like serpent, like sort of giant eels, to a sea snaky sort of a guy, right? So, I mean, um, other things, there's was a endemic population in the St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario, and pretty well most of the Great Lakes here that I can ascertain. In the 1800s, there was actually groups of seals that had lived in there for like massive eons, but the natives there finally cleared them out, and then the damming and all these weird things, right? So now you only get wayward sort of sightings. It doesn't seem like there's an actual population in any of these, right? But nevertheless, they're still seen, and other certain strange ones, right? So, but the serpent kind, some of the natives still, I saw not that long ago some fellow. He's a guy into Canadian history like myself, and he likes all these weird monster stuff and everything. And some native fellow had written him in and told him about a story out there, right? And that sort of thing like that. So they're still happening, and that sort of thing like that. And my personally, I know what I saw, like, and this lady was with me. I mean, this thing was huge, and these kids, the same thing. Like, I mean, it couldn't have been a fish. It looked like a whale serpent, right? But you couldn't see it that well, right? Like, and that sort of thing. And back then, the St. Lawrence River was muddy and murky, right? It wasn't clear like it is now, right? The zebra mussels got in and all that sort of thing. But it's a huge river. It feeds most of the Great Lakes, like Lake Ontario, Lake Huron, and these different ones, right? Superior, and that. It might feed another one, but anyways, like at least it feeds those ones, right? And from the last time when I was on a tournament on there, I checked all the maps and everything. I think it was like 500 plus kilometers roughly in that range that's linked. But if you want to include like tributaries and all kinds of other weird things that it's all meeting into, then it would be like 900 sort of kilometers. I'm sure somewhere in this sort of range, maybe 1,000. I don't know. I don't know exactly that, but it would be big, right? Like, and that sort of thing like that. So okay, so we'll have to stop this for a minute. We were interrupted there a little bit and that sort of thing like that. So all kinds of things have appeared in the St. Lawrence. I have many records of early boaters, traders, different things that saw sea serpents in the St. Lawrence from Quebec City all the way through the different regions, right? Also, bodies of water that they all attach to that flow in and out of them. The other Great Lakes and all the different ones, all of these have these serpent reports, right? Like sometimes scientists upset me like a lot. Like I showed you a legitimate 100%. There should be no more argument on this planet. There is such things as giant angolas that are 20, 30, maybe 40 plus feet. There could even be way bigger, who knows? But at least in this range, that Balkan's film is 100% pure, no ifs or buts about it. It's a giant longfin in the highest likelihood from because the top ridge-like structure that it has. It's an unusual fish where it has like a long, long sort of rayish fin that goes all the way over the top, goes then under the underbelly all the way to the other side, and the long pin one is a little bit longer in, right? So it's more likely one of those than a wayward, short pin eel. Both of them can get titanic. The Lake Michigan monsters prove this, and some of the other ones to a highest degree. How any person could say that I had a conversation with Tim, and he's a very very nice man. The guy went out there, he filming this storm, and this monster comes, and it's not a pipe. You're morons. Like any person that says that is an idiot. I've been all my life fishing for Angolas. I know what they look like, right? And that's an Angola in that film. 100% at the end. If anybody even bothers in freezing the frames, you can 100% prove this. It's not one of these stupid pipes. The stupid pipes are either rounded at the end or they have like a funnel like thing. This is completely sort of like a normal caudal fin like sort of thing, right? And 100% like a typical Angola's, and it was just more huge. That's all right. Like, but I mean, and that, and I suspect these horsehair eels that people have seen in the Thames River to all through Europe and that, and in North America sometimes, and that this is some phenomena where the eel gets trapped in there and super ancient old ones or some kind of a close species that's so close that we never been identified one like in a body, right? Like they may even look the same at different developments until really like old stuff here, right? Like one guy, a scientist, found inside of a well that had not been used for over 300 years, and it was made between the 300 to 400 years before, right? And he found the seal in there, and it had growth rings inside of it over 300 and some years, right? So could you imagine the only reason he didn't turn a monster in there is because he's locked in this sort of, your body knows this. I've noticed this with fish that I raised since a kid in aquariums, right? Wild ones to regular fish you would buy at the dollar store, like sort of stuff going, right? That kind of thing, like the old Woolworths, they used to have that, and Walmart. I don't think Walmart has it anymore. Maybe some areas they do, but they used to have it here, and I don't see that anymore. The sort of little fishies, right? And that, but and that sort of thing. So you could get all this sorts of stuff in the early days, right? Sort of thing like that. And I know one thing that they just, at a certain point, the only way you're going to get like monster sized koi or other sorts of things is by giving them an environment big enough where their body can grow, right? So Lake Michigan is certainly giant body of water, right? I mean, it's so deep and everything else in some areas that the Navy uses it for tests and everything. And there's stories from these guys that they don't like talking about in that of giant eels. But some guys bug me sometimes, like Jeremy Wade, as a for instance, right? Nice fellow. I fully get his thing. But they do don't understand the average person that's an angler and that when they're seeing these things because they're not like really that massively knowledgeable on the subject, right? They believe these fish to be monsters, but most of the stuff that you ever see them with is actually average size of these creatures, right? Of the different ones, and they can get way massively bigger, right? So it's no different than a North American angler, you know what I mean, catching all kinds of species that are just, you know, like a muskie that's only, I don't know, 50 inches, right? To me, that's not a monstrous fish, right? And that sort of thing. But to somebody else, that would be Titanic, right? So this, what I'm saying, like people like this, then when they see this on these things, like, you know, you'll see a picture of an L's catfish that he's caught. It's like 5 feet. In old times, they used to get 4 times that size, and not massively long ago, up to at least 15 feet. And I disagree with the scientists there about the Asian catfish being the largest. Is actually L's have always outweighed them, and in lengthwise, right? So in ancient times, there was some stories of 18 to 20 foot Mekong catfish and stuff like that in the earliest times, but one now even 10 feet is considered quite a monster, right? And that sort of thing like that. Whilst the L's catfish in any body of water, you can go in many places, right? They can get Titanic like in this range, just even a small body of water. There was a kid in England in a pond, for crying out loud, that caught one near 9 feet long. Right? You know, but they don't really have records over there for them, and they're kind of like a banned species, right? So strange, right? But anyway, so that sort of thing like that. And I know there's some monster ones in Lake Windermere, besides possibly the drag pike may still exist, right? Who knows? I would love to see one of these things. I'd be terrified of it because I mean it killed lots of people, right? But I also wouldn't be scared of it as much as I am swimming when I was in Florida and seeing somebody attacked by a shark. Uh, I don't like swimming in the ocean any after that, right? Like that was it. Like, no way, man. You know, and I certainly wouldn't be swimming in any Australian rivers or African ones, right? It could be all over in microseconds, right? Or the Amazon, etc., right? You know, there's catfish there that can eat human beings, right? I have some old stories of that actually, right, and that sort of thing. But guys like him sometimes, because they're scientists and they got to sound, you know, a certain way, right? He'll suggest that that these serpents that these natives would tell him that they saw in Eagle Lake, as for instance, or different things, right? That it must be just an oversized muskie. I mean, really, are you ever being insulting to these natives? They've been spearing giant esox, northern pike, and esox masquinonge for massive, because depending on the tribe, hundreds to thousands of years, right? So this is complete ludicrous sort of thing here that these guys would mistake. You know what I mean, like that, and if Jeremy Wade even wanted to bother and look, go look at the bloody Balkans film. And come on, Jeremy, like if the guy ever watched it, right? If he kept saying that this must be, you know, or it's like a miniature pond and the fish is only 3 feet long, it's all BS. You know it, I know it, right? There's been people I saw interviews with a guy that was a commercial eel fisherman, and he got one in his net that was monstrous, right? That tore the thing to shreds. There's gazillions of these stories worldwide, right? All my relatives from Ireland, Scotland, all that. Loch Ness has an excellent film in recent times around a trout hatchery that they have on there, right? Where you clearly see this monstrous eel come by, right? And he's not as big as the Balkans one, but he's still a monster. I'm sure this thing, compared to the average size like char and trout and stuff that is in this hatchery, right? You know, 2 to 5 pounds sort of fish here, right? Like this dude is. 8 to 10 times at least longer than any of them bare minimum, right? So I, this guy's got to be like, 10 to 14 feet in length, somewhere in there, probably in this sort of range. It's hard to know because you don't know the size exactly of the char to make a comparison, or the different trout that's in some of the film, right? But the thing is that at the end of the day, that's way bigger than accepted again by scientists, right? And that sort of thing like that. So they can really get this big, right? And so for these guys to suggest that the natives are this stupid that they don't know a difference between, yeah, you know what I mean, an esox masquinage and a giant Angola, right? Like, come on. I mean, really? Like, so I mean, they actually really exist. There is no doubt about it. They exist in Lake Michigan. I'm positive they at least at one time existed in the Ottawa River. I was towed around for mass hours by, I believe, an Angola. Like, I didn't fight like a couple of times when you get a bite from a sturgeon or catfish, you'd miss them and somehow it would still hook them somewhere, right? I'll hook them, right? And that sort of thing like that. And they'd fight him, do weird stuff, more a little bit eelish. But this was 100% like all eelish stuff. And a lot of times the guy wasn't moving his tail that much and more fighting like a sturgeon and just, towing you along, right? And that. But this guy was hundreds of pounds, right? And even the biggest eels I ever saw besides that, like guiding all those times I had giant ones that might have been an eel straighten out big hooks and things. But as far as like me catching a little over 5 feet and seeing one time that was about 7 feet in length, probably because it was over, well over, I'd say like another probably a foot and a half to 2 feet or more, a little bit past the 60-inch ruler, right? And that sort of thing like that. So it floated and it was in a big bend, right? So you have to add a fair amount on each side. It was all perfectly straightened out, right? And that sort of thing like that. So it was at least as big as the one I showed you, and another one that was found dead floating up on the coast of Texas, I think it was, right? So the thing is that these certainly exist, right? So no more of the Joe Nichols answer, it's always a log stuff, right? And the St. Lawrence River has this kind of thing in it. There's also Titanic sturgeon in there, the odd wayward shark, and other bizarre sorts of stuff has shown up in there, like seals and different things, right? So it's a smorgasbord of everything, a little bit of everything, right? Like in most major bodies of water and that sort of thing, like that. Uh, like the Ottawa River, here's another sort of one. They all interconnect, right? And that, I mean, there's wacky stuff in there, and I mean wacky stuff. I was with this guy from Ohio, and we were with a couple other people, and they led out the tourists, and we were all looking out, and this big head snake-like thing. That's the what I would call a for sure wasn't a sturgeon or any kind of weird, like it had to be some kind of unknown serpenty like sort of thing. This thing came up and started swimming upriver, right around this locking system and then it turned around and things like that. I was with another time this lady, and we might have either witnessed a possible some kind of wayward whale or something like that. This thing breathed air like a whale or a dolphin or something would, right? Like, I don't think it was a seal, and it had more of a shape like some kind of between a porpoise and a whale, right? But we watched this thing. This lady I was with, Loretta. We went out fishing. I brought her fishing stuff, and you kept seeing these zillions of minnows, and this was before the zebra mussel infestation, right? And that, and you kept seeing all these like zillions of minnows and that, and they were still logging in the river, and they were jumping everywhere, right? And this giant commotion's blowing up all around it, all over, going back and forth up the river. She said, "What's causing that?" And I said, "There's got to be some Titanic's weird wayward school of fish here or something that's doing this. I said, let's get in on this action. It could be anything from some lost white bass, who knows, right? Like I said, the Ottawa River has over 100 species. It only lists 90, but there's other ones in there. Everything from hogsucker to smallmouth buffalo and some other bizarre stuff that have floated in there somehow, right? Several kinds of trout species and different ones, right? That are there, but they're in very limited supply, both and different ones, right? So there's other ones that they don't have listed, right? But all that river has the craziest sort of things in it, right? But we watched this thing blowing up, and it came right past our boat, right? And these bubbles were shooting out of its head, like where whales would be, right? And it had nothing, like, it wasn't a diver or snorkel guy or any kind of thing like that. I mean, this thing had big either fins or flukes of something, like some kind of fin like structure, right? And then it had a longer tail, and it was waving, right? So it was very whale like or porpoise, but the river was much muddier then, right? And you couldn't see, but she was petrified of this thing, right? And that's so yeah. So poor Loretta there, but she was a really nice girl, a country girl, and that sort of thing like that, right? And that's so, but uh, you know, we saw this thing like probably 8, 10 times in one day, like blowing up on seemingly minnows of some sort, right? Like a different kinds, right? That was what much more common in the river in those early days. So whatever this thing was, it was whale like, right? And there was a guy, an ice fisherman, that snagged a porpoise that, because it couldn't find any breathing holes, it actually suffocated down there. But he snagged a porpoise, an actual porpoise on his fishing line. It was like about 5 feet long, this thing, right? And he was able to get it to the hole and all that sort of things like that. I had a shark run in on the St. Lawrence myself, where besides seeing what I believe may have been some giant shark, because the shape of it was very similar, right? Like, whalish, sharkish, right? Like that sort of thing, right? But whatever it was, besides that, when I was out ice fishing, I got this thing right to the hole that I made. I couldn't even get barely its nose part of it in through the big wide hole that they already had, right? So this thing was hundreds of pounds, right? And it definitely was a Greenland shark. It couldn't have been anything else. It really looked like one. It looked like a shark to me, right? And everything. But the water was murky, and it was hard. Like, I mean, you could only get his nose up, right? But I saw a few times him coming, like when I'd pull him up and he'd go down again, right? But I saw his eye, like part of his face, at one point kind of bend around, and I just saw a little glance of it, right? And it certainly looked sharkish to me, to sturgeonish like of a thing, right? But the big teeth on it and everything, it had to be one of these Greenland sharks. And since others was hooked exactly in the same place that I went ice fishing, that's either that or some other sort of species of shark, right? But whatever he was, it was hundreds of pounds. So that's the coolest thing in the world, to hook something that huge ice fishing, right? So it was my Loch Ness monster of ice fishing stories, right? And that sort of thing like that. But the Ottawa River has such a bizarre stuff. I was with another time was with this fellow, and we were out bass fishing. It was so quiet, not no boats. It was early, still the logs were out, all that stuff, and this big giant wave in this big back came up and started like going along right past us, right? And then it just went down, and it was too big to be like a sturgeon's back, right? And that it looked smoother, almost like as if you were like a hippopotamus or some creature like that, right? So whatever the hell this thing was, it was really big, and I mean really big. It had a big back, and this thing was just going along, but you couldn't see it. It was so muddy, the water, right? And it was far off a little bit. And many sightings that we had of strange, like either giant sturgeon like things. There was a couple that I knew. I just met them once. They had just They never was out in a yacht before in their entire life. Okay, so can you imagine? And they get this idea to retire out and float around in their big macho yacht and all that sort of stuff, right? So they get this thing and they parked near the Gatineau River, right? Well, in the middle of the night, some monstrous thing with a gigantic back with a ridge on it, so I suspect it was a sturgeon of some sort, apparently didn't like this boat and smashed into it about three, four times, just like a Jaws like thing. These people shine the flashlight, and it definitely was some kind of fish monster of some sort. It had like a ridge back, and it kept ramming into the side of the boat, right? And bouncing into it and doing weird stuff, right? So maybe it was like feeding underneath it, and part of its tail and back was just bouncing into it as it's digging along for something. Who knows, right? Like, I mean, I don't really know if the monster was like trying to sink their boat like a Jaws thing. I can't, this kind of thing, I have no idea, right? But, anyways, they got so scared that they sold their yacht for way massively less than what they paid for it at a great big loss to get rid of the problem and became back to landlubbers, right? So, so I mean, yeah, there's stuff there. I interviewed an old logger guy that used to work the sloughs over in the upper Ottawa River. There's this shoot area, right? And there was like logging that would go there, like massive tons of it, and it would go down. And this old man, there was this great big long boom thing out there about 25 feet or so on it, and this sturgeon came by and was bigger than that boom thing. This is like in early times, right? Like, because that guy was older when I met him. I was a young fellow, maybe like early 70s, right? When I interviewed him. So, I think that this occurred like in the 1910, 20s, 30s range, right? Somewhere in there when the river was even more jungle-ish then, right? Like sort of thing, right? So I mean, anyways, this body of water from Lac de Montagne in there is quite often like more of a sea serpenty sort of guy, right? And there's been even a mermaids. I mean, the list is endless. But we're gonna talk next about the mysterious walking fish with legs and sort of things like that. But the St. Lawrence, all these major bodies of water, the Great Lakes, all of them have a much longer history, some of them than even Nest or different things. And I don't like when sometimes some of these biologist guys try and poo poo this down. There really is, I mean, sometimes I'm sure a giant eel is mistaken by somebody as a sea serpent, right? It all depends on how it comes up out of the water, how long his head's out there, and different things like that. But we truly know for sure that Balkan film is not CGI, it's real. And that guy is Titanic. He's way bigger than accepted in science. The same with the Lake Michigan film, and there's some others out there, right? And that sort of thing like that. I covered another one where these guys keep following it with the video in Ben's, right? And I mean this guy's a monster, right? Like, I don't know how long it is, but I can't believe that this thing's less than 9, 10 feet long and maybe way longer than that, right? So another interesting film out there of a proof of giant Angolas exists, right? So, anyways, all these ages, these guys make big money being the skeptical guy in the TV show when he really doesn't know what he's talking about. They exist, man. There is such thing as mobile lake monsters. There's also giant eels, right? Both short fin and long fin variety. There's also horse-haired eels that I believe exist because the drag pike didn't he had the same weird thing, right? So I think this is some kind of offbeats of these creatures, like a where they changed, like, you know what I mean, became their own kind of species, right? Like, I have this, and it shows how pollution, even in the earliest times, affected all kinds of things. I have this wonderful story from, I believe it was a lake in Germany or or Yugoslavia, someplace like one of those ones, right? And in some of these Balkan-like countries, somewhere in there, right, in a region, right? And they talked about these beautiful pink seahorses that lived there that were about 5 to 8 feet long, right? And they looked like a seahorse like face, right? It had these beautiful fins and stuff, and they were pink, right? And they would come along, and but then they said that they started allowing them to do all kinds of building and stuff along the lake, right? And then somehow this caused them, they started noticing they were vanishing, right? And they went extinct, right? And that sort of thing like that. So even in the earliest times like that, this is like massive century. I believe this is like the 14th or 15th century that this occurred, right? So the thing is that it's interesting that even in the earliest times, there might have been all kinds of wacky stuff locked in some of our lakes, or that existed that got in through some methodology, underwater caverns to flooded rivers, what have you, right? However, the case, even our stupidity in earliest times, right? Like, so a lot of these lake monsters have vanished over the ages, right? Like hundreds of what I call extinct lake monsters. I don't see any sightings after the 1800s, early 1900s, not a single mention by anybody or anything, right? So it's like as if they just vanish off the face of the earth. And usually, when you read into it, right, something happened, like they made hotels there, or they did this and that, and these guys, then maybe the food supply, if you allow commercial fishing and all kinds of stuff, all of a sudden then they're not seen much anymore, right? So only some lakes that don't have as much fishing population, don't have commercial fishing, don't have this, that, haven't dammed too much, like where there's still ways of these creatures getting in somehow, right? These ones still get more sightings of stuff, right? But a lot of them don't, right? And it could be that we either block them from getting into all kinds of things, right? So I mean, but there's a lot of mysterious sort of cryptids out there that do have basis on reality, right? So anyways, but we'll continue on here. In my region and all over, you'll find this in dams from every place around the world, from the Chernobyl Dam to Rito Falls Dam. You get these stories of gigantic monster fish, right? Of epic size and crazy stuff, right? And some of them are actually true, right? Wayward sharks and this sort of thing. I knew this diver, Eddie, that would go down and he would get these. Lures around the falls and Hogsback and the Gatineau River and stuff. And this guy's seen an amazing amount of wacky, like cryptid like stuff at the river because he was diving in it when it was all like the murky stuff, right? And that sort of thing like that. So he witnessed one time this fish that looked like a carp that was about 4 feet long and had these golden scales on it, but it had feet, right? So exactly like I'm going to mention some other ones here and that. I ran across somebody 2 years ago that was out with a buddy. And they got this one with feet on it, and it was about 3 feet long. The same thing with scales, right? And it looked like to him like some kind of sucker. So the explanation of a tiger salamander and things like that, it explains a lot of these stories over the years, but not all of them. And these fish with legs have been from giant shark-like fish that was found in the 1800s. That there's a great drawing of. I think I might have it on some one of the other shows or something about some other topic or something, right? But that sort of thing like that. And but wayward giant octopus, giant muskies, and killer pike, wayward sharks, right? Like giant catfish and this. And this guy had some wild stories, man, some wild ones. He was down there, and this thing tried to first bump him, right?
and it looked like some kind of shark to giant catfish to him. He didn't see whiskers, but it had a big head like a giant catfish to him. And this thing was way like twice the size of him. And it went to try and go at him again. And he always carried this sort of like Bowie knife like thing with him. And he jabbed at the side of this thing, and then it decided to take off right at that. And then another time he was down there around this Rito Falls Dam, and this octopus monster attacked him. So like I never, this is the only Ottawa River octopus monster story I've ever gotten, right? Like, but I mean there could be others, right? Because I've collected them all over and a lot of major rivers that this has occurred from before. But he said that this thing was like at least about 7 to 8 feet wide, right? And with great big huge tentacles that were 8 to 10 feet long, sort of that tried to wrap around him, and he sliced it. And the thing let him go, and then he escaped, right? So, I mean, but there's been these others, right? Like other dams, the Kankakee River. I ran into some wardens that this guy caught this one right in there, right? Like, so, I mean, there's strange stuff that goes on, right? And that sort of thing like that. So, but uh, this mysterious walking fish thing has been reported as far as like South Dakota, Florida, and a lot of regions, right? Like a little sparse stuff where it's not common and it's more of a local known sort of thing, right? And a lot of times I agree with the skeptics that it's a tiger salamander. I use them for bait since I was a kid, right? They catch titanic pike, muskies, walleyes, largemouth bass. They irritate anything, right? Because these things will go in and grab at the eggs in their nests and stuff like that. They'll eat worms and stuff. And we used to catch like sometimes 4 or 5 in a day when they were really common, right? And that sort of thing like that. But I saw an Asian guy, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and he had one that he caught out of the Ottawa River with a worm, right? So they still exist, and they're incorrect information, right? But these dams worldwide have these sort of wacky sort of stories, right? Of either butte fish or different all kinds of stuff, right? And I mean, deviled horned pike from my region, like you got octopus, you got like all kinds of crazy wayward fish, sharks and stuff like that. With my own, like I had two encounters in the St. Lawrence River of what I believe was, one I hooked, the other I just observed for a long time with this lady, right? And that sort of thing. And so I had two like run ins of what I would call a shark like creature in the St. Lawrence River, right? And in the Otter River, I had a suic bitten in half that bit right through like this sort of, I don't know, it's like brass, like thick wire. I mean, no muskie that I've ever seen, and I caught the biggest muskies that's ever been released by anybody out there, and that sort of thing like that. I've always kept these things quiet, but some of my shows, you see some of the monsters I've released over the years and things like that, and I catch, I've been hunting for them since I was four, right? So a long time, right? And that sort of thing. I've been catching giant ones since I was four, right? So, I mean, but the thing is that so I know that, like, I mean, they'll put teeth marks in it, they'll grind it up, they'll do different things, but they can't bite one in half, right? Like, at least I've never seen it, right? Like, so because that takes a hell of a lot of bite radius. Plus, this thing was titanic on the screen, way bigger than a muskie could be, right? Like at many things. The biggest muskie that I ever personally hooked myself, that it was this white muskie. A lot of people don't believe this story, but it was true. I believe it was an albino or something. But I was in the Trent River, and I was casting out this big spinner bait, homemade sort of jobby, and this monster hit and went flying all over the place and doing jumps and stuff. And I got it right near the boat, and it did another jump there. And it's very rare that you'll lose them. Actually, off a spinner, I don't very rarely lose a fish with spinnerbaits, and that certain families of baits you don't lose too many. But this fish had lures all stuck, and so other people must have hooked this thing, right? And that but this dude was like, I had a 60-inch ruler on the side, right? And this thing was like 2.5 to 3 feet longer than it, right? Like, so I believe that this fish was in the 7 foot plus, early plus range, right? The biggest, longest dude I've ever seen. And it was white, seemingly like possibly an albino or something really weird with it, anyways, right? Like, I didn't see its eyes or anything, right? So, you know, the water was back in those days. I don't know what it's like nowadays. I haven't fished that river system in ages, but it was a bit more swampy-ish, like, right? So you didn't see them like 100% grade, right? And that sort of thing like that. And a fellow that I made fun of at this dam area, he was throwing a giant daredevil, and I get a kick out of this. It's the king of amateur lures, right? Sort of thing, right? So I was teasing him. You love the daredevil and all this stuff, right? And this head came out that was titanic in width, titanic mouth, just inhaled everything. All you've seen is the guy rip yanked right over, and now he's screaming and telling me he can't swim. And I said, "What?" He's like, "Why are you up on this cliff like that?" So I jumped in and grabbed onto him, and meanwhile the rod's wrestling and everything. It ripped out of his hand. This thing then turned around, and you've seen it just like a Jaws movie. It swam right past me and this guy, and this guy was a real tall dude, like 6'5", maybe 6'4" at bare minimum, but more likely about 6'5", 6'6" on him. And this muskie was longer than him and much bigger than me, right? It went right past him. The girth on this old lady, I mean, it was extraordinarily bad. Another time I reeled in over 14-pound walleye, and it stopped midway and started shaking, and the teeth marks across were astonishing, like astonishing, right? Bigger than any of the 60 plus sort of monsters I've seen over the years. And so I believe that was a super titan, right? And that sort of thing. Like, so there's some real monsters in some of this, but this Eddie diver, he was down along one of the bridge pilings, and another diver told me the same story, interesting, the same area, right? They both said that they've ran across muskies down there 7 to 1 that was maybe about 8 feet long. That was staring right at them, almost like as if they wanted to eat them, right? As would scare the living crap out of them, and they could see better because they had big lights with them and stuff like that. So I mean, there. I don't know if any of these fish of this size still exist in the Ottawa River with the zebra mussels clearing it up and other things. I've not seen any fish over 63.5 inches. Is the biggest one I've seen in the last like many years, right? Like, so they're and most of them are like 60, 61, later 50s. This is the kind of stuff that I still run across on Big Monster, but that's about it, right? So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's a giant monster in some quiet back bay someplace, right? You know, he's still out there, right? Or at the dam or whatever, right? But I mean, because I can't cover all these areas anymore and all this kind of things like that. It's hard to keep up on this, but there's still monsters in a lot of these bodies of water in the St. Lawrence River, still Lake of the Woods, and there's some other ones, right, and that sort of thing like that. But some of these dam areas do truly have some crazy sort of things in them. But this walking fish thing is very confusing because of the amount of reports I've gotten over the years where the creature had scales, right? These tiger salamanders don't look like that, and that sort of thing like that. So this is not an explanation, right? I've yet to see an example of one of these things. The only time I've seen, they called them the crack creature, which I always found funny, and the cave creatures. The French guys would say, "Hey, you see them, they come out of the cracks of the wall, the cave, or you catch them on the line," and the guy would go on, right, and that sort of thing. So very entertaining sort of thing. And like I said, in the earliest times, you would catch these like three, four, five easily in a day's time. Quite often, being there, if you were there in the spring, that's how common they were, right? But just this one guy, this Eddie guy, he ran across a devil horn pike too, right? Another guy, Jean. What was this? Jean Louis, Jean Guy. I don't know. There's so many of these Jean guys. I for some reason, I always run across people like this with this name or similar, and they always got funny, entertaining stories for me, right? From devil canoes to you name it, right? The Ottawa River has a smorgasbord of wackiness to it, right? But I find these giant walking fish interesting with the feed. I don't know what to really say about it, right? Like, is this some adaptation that's feasible or whatever? Like, but I've yet to see, like, personally, except drawings and descriptions and interviewing people that have seen them. And it seems common. I mean, I'm seriously have ran across massive dozens of these stories since I was a kid, right? Of that, and them arguing with you, telling you, no, it has scales or looked like a carp or a sucker. A lot of them look like a carp or a sucker, but I had a few other ones that were weird. There was one that was like a pike or a muskie kind of thing. So, I mean, it could be feasible that this is some mutant thing that happens so at different ones, right? Like, but it's a large phenomena, even though it's very little talked about. But it's still interesting in a lot of bodies of water from the United States to Canada. You also have giant salamander reports where some of these guys are 3, 4 feet long, 5 feet long. That's way too big to be a hellbender or whatever, like that sort of thing, right? So there these stories of even them where the guy knows that that's what it is. It's like a salamander like thing. And some of them are titanic, like the Asian stories you get, of the Asian salamanders, and they can reach at least 5 feet. And old times, I think they could probably get 7, 8 feet long, right? So, all things creatures were bigger at earlier times, right? And that sort of thing like that because lack of damming, lack of pollution, lack of population on some of the waters and all that sort of thing, right? So, but very interesting, anyways. I just wanted to talk about it a bit. The Ottawa River monster still seen from you got the still giant sturgeon phenomena. You got a plesiosaur like creature, sort of very rare, but there has been some of them. A sea serpent, giant snake like creature that's a mobile like monster, right? You have porpoise, seals, walrus, sharks, and other things to add to the phenomena. Killer octopus, you know. So I mean, like I said, people that go swimming in major rivers, me personally, I think, especially if it's murky ones, you're out to lunch because you don't know what's in there. And I mean, from the Potomac River to all over, there's sharks floating up these things. They're really there, and you might be the bad guy to have the bad luck to go for a swim and doo doo. Right? So, me, I stay in the boat, right? Whatnot, but I don't go because I've seen unidentified that I know could not have been a shark or a muskie or any of these things. So I know it was some kind of animal, not like a recognizable, typical one to science sort of thing here that I saw it a few times, right, over the years, Ogopogo and a few other places, including some strange thing in the Ottawa River once that was really weird. But the thing is that there's uh, these different sorts. There's real fish that are super huge, way bigger than they should get, and all kinds of things add to this phenomenon. Wayward fish and things like that, that you add it all up, that makes these sort of phenomena a lot, right? But I mean, they're out there though. So if you've ever caught one of these walking fish, I don't care what state, province, wherever it is, if it's over in Europe, please send me a photo. I'd love to finally see one. And, you know, like not a salamander, because, and there's other kinds of salamanders that are similar to tiger salamanders that also can look like that, right? So, you know, they may add to some of this sort of thing too, right? Like, and that sort of thing. But anyways, well, we'll continue on. Talk next year. I'm gonna the first person in the world to ever introduce this. So anybody that claims any different, they're full of it. Um, the people don't even have a name for it, so there is no local name yet. At least not as of recent months, right? And that so. I'm going to talk about this lady that I interviewed with some others that was there, and also other people that they mention and things like that, the third party stories and that. But however, like roughly, uh, maybe 15 or 20 people in this village, okay, that's along the ocean shores, right? Sort of thing like that. Uh, Around 2020, saw a creature that's very similar to what we're looking at here, right? And that. So, uh, it's very interesting, and I talked to this lady. She was quite serious and everything like that. You know, and it's some kind of strange thing. He's almost like a skinwalker, okay, but also like a mermaid a little bit because he lives seemingly in the water and that sort of thing like that. And but he's got like a human like body, but this pure white milky skin, and he has a face like a wolf. Okay, the creatures are about 4 to 5 feet tall, and this lady, they were walking along the surf, right? And all of a sudden, this thing crawled up and it started first walking like a chimp man sort of thing, right? Then it stood up and it started walking like a normal human being, and that it was pure white and that. But she said that on the sides, up around like where his head was, there was some kind of weird like hair like substance a little bit, right? So otherwise, the creature has no like seemingly hair at all, and she wasn't even sure what that stuff was on his head, right? So it could have been hair, it could have been, I don't know, some seaweed, who knows, right? But some kind of thing like that. But anyways, and this is a general description of it. It's usually between 4 to 5 feet tall. It always crawls out of the surface, pure white, right? Has a face like a wolf, right? And is very sort of, almost like a skinwalkery like thing, except like an ocean version, right? So this lady was really serious about it. She didn't like. I mean, and every one of them was 4 or 5 feet tall. I mean, if you're imagining all this stuff, usually things are bigger if they're sort of, yeah, it's 15 feet tall and it eats a gorilla and all this sort of stuff, right? Like so, uh, this lady and the other ones all nodded. They all see this thing. It's pure milky, like a cream white almost, right? And that, but it's human like almost like a human, except he's got a face like a wolf's, right? And strange hands and feet that are more, I don't know, mermaidish, almost like lizardy, like a bit strange, right? Sort of thing like that. So whatever this thing is, I don't have the village. I can't find. I have it written down someplace, and I can't remember. Yeah, but it's somewhere in Nunavut, right? And like I said, I saw met about four of them, right? That have all ran across this sort of thing, and this all started around 2020, right? And nobody has a name for it or anything like that. Now there is a similar creature out in that sort of regions and all that sort of thing. But he's more like a lizard, and I covered him on another show and that, and he's known to follow like seals and walrus stuff like that, and the guy will leap out. and just grab onto one of them and then drag them back into the sort of thing. And they have scales like a dragon. And it's a very crocodilian sort of dragonish like sort of creature of some sort, like that sort of thing, right? So slightly different, but and it's got scales and everything. But that's another sort of weird cryptid there that the wazoo is a really hard to name to pronounce. Wazugnum, something like that. Anyway, so just even saying his name is wild, right? But anyways, I believe that cryptid to be real. But it seems like it's rare, and it seems it only shows up like when there's um, like a mating time when there's big herds of seals or walrus or stuff like that, right? That kind of creatures, like anything like that, so whatever families, right, different ones, right, and that. Uh, when there's big groups of them on islands or things like this, this creature will come and hunt them, right? And it's all like through the illusions and the different things, right? So it's like a bit of a broader, more cryptid monster, right? Like there seems to be like a fairly, as long as it's way up north, there sort of stuff there. This thing's been reported from time to time by different sorts and that, right? So, but anyways, this is a world exclusive cryptid. I don't know what to say. Obviously, this creature can live in the water, right? Like, so, does he have gills? I tried to get this off, but she didn't notice anything like that. So, you know, either it's like some kind of mammal like creature where they come up rare sometimes or whatever, or have some strange ability that we're not aware of, right? And that sort of thing like that. But this lady, the main witness, and the other ones there, they were really serious about this, and not to me like over exaggerating. I had to ask specific questions to get an answer, like sort of thing like that. But they were tripped out by it, right? And since then, it's been seen from time to time, right? But nobody, and I kept asking her, like I said, do you guys not have a nickname for it yet, or anything like that? No, 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 nobody's ever heard of it before, right? So at least their group, anyways, right? Maybe some other Nunavut group out there knows about it, right? But whatever the case, right? So very interesting. Another real cryptid out there that is, probably real in the highest probability, and that it sounds to me not that unbelievable. Sounds like some kind of strange, sort of thing here, like maybe some weird seal like creature that's adapt more and has a more wolfish like face. Some seals have a really good pointy face on them and things like that. And maybe he has like a different sword here, like some kind of merman like sort of thing, where the guy actually has some kind of feet of some sort and hands, right? So whatever the case, it's really hard to know, right? Like, but he's out there. so anyways, we'll continue on. But I find this is like very interesting. If we can get a name for this creature and that sort of thing like that, sort of thing like that, then that'd be good, or that sort of thing like that. But whatever it is, it's certainly like unknown, right? Like in the general sense of the term, except a small amount of people that see this, and not it doesn't have a big long history, right? So that's strange, right? Some creature that got off course, or that previous times the offspring like the previous ones were a bit more shy, and maybe these newer ones from food supply or something are a bit more out there, where they'll actually come up in the shore, not as scared of people. Who knows, right? Like some kind of wacky thing, right? But they don't see it often. It hasn't been seen too many times. And the thing always does the same. It seems to come from the ocean, and then it'll crawl up and walk on all fours for a while and walk strange, right? And that sort of thing like that. And then all of a sudden walk up and be able to walk like a regular human being a little bit. And it's got a wolf like face, right? So, and pure cream white of some that kind of thing, right? So it's some wolfish mermaidish man of some sort, right? Like some wacky sort of thing, right? Like mixture here of some sort that is a bit interesting. But anyways, this is about the closest description. This is a description of a white walker sort of thing, right? But this is very similar, like what they're describing, right? Except it didn't have horns on it or anything. It just had like a face, like and ears, that kind of thing, more like a wolf's, right? Sort of thing like that. So in some ways, that kind of tells me it could be some strange, unknown pinniped like creature of some sort where they have more arms and legish like thing instead of the typical sort of thing. That could be. I mean, there's strange things out there, right? Like, I mean, there's dolphins that are strange. There was in many old reports of two fin sort of whales and dolphins and stuff like that. And there's some backing of it, and whether it's a separate species or some anatomical freak, right, or whatever, right, still exists out there. And I have probably the highest probability. These people seemed all quite serious. They didn't get any money from me or a bottle of muscatel or anything, right? Like, so, I mean, there's, and they were quite serious about it. I fully believe that this whatever it is exists, right? But I mean, it could be some kind of strange, a mammal of some sort, right? That is like more like hairless of some sort, right? Or I don't know if there's such thing as sea mange, right? There could be. I never heard of it, but I mean, yeah, even though I'm well read, I don't know. There's always something new, right? So I just something I don't personally know, right? But I mean, if such a thing existed, then I suppose the odd seal or other creatures might have not fur on it, but I mean that wouldn't explain the legs, right? Like, so you see what I mean? Like, it sounds like it's fully like the wazi ugnum or ugum. Wazi ugum, whatever. It's some crazy name very close to that, right? Like, somebody's really hard to pronounce. But anyways, my buddy the wazi ugum there, he's out there too, right? Like, so there's strange things out in the kinds of regions, right? Simply because you got low population, it's very difficult the terrain to do anything, right? And all that sort of thing like that. So if you add all this up, right, you could see why that'd be easy for creatures to evade you out in the waters, right? Like, I remember when I was a kid, they said, oh no, the biggest no fish can live in the Antarctic and they'd freeze and blah and all this stuff. Then some guy started catching these some were up over 5 feet in that, but they believed that they were just some weird, really rare thing, right? And then they finally got cameras down there and thousands of kinds of life that they never seen before, including sea serpent monster like things, and everything else has been now seen in these Antarctic like waters and all these cold places, right? So there's a flourishing life down there too. It just reacts different and does its own sort of thing, right? So there's probably all kinds of cryptids there. That's like I mean. I'm a huge, huge believer in the sea cow that possibly there's still some around, right? And that sort of thing like that. Stellar sea cow. There was a wonderful description and these sailors are not experts on any of this stuff. And conveniently, even the plant that they described that the creatures were chewing on was known to be liked by the stellar sea cow, right? So, I mean, to me, that's an extremely credible sort of thing. And these creatures are feeding around some kind of this lava like thing where there's a heat area there of some sort, right? So, I mean, what a great place if people stock this eventually. Maybe another group of these guys would come back, right? And you'd be able to prove that this creature still exists, right? So, I mean, it's so feasible. It's like mountains of ice and everything. The big ships coming by. Maybe the earliest stellar sea cow were a bit stupid, right? But maybe over time they learn to avoid humans a little bit better, right? And that sort of thing like that. and then built this into them like many other creatures did, right? And that, I mean, there's been all kinds of animals that you could walk up to that you'll find in more wild versions not far off that will react to you very different than a city one. Like when I go downtown, there's pigeons will stand right at my feet there. That's crazy, right? Like they're not scared below zero, right? Like, I mean, and they just, cuckoo and they consider you like some kind of like their parent, almost give them chow, right? Sort of thing like that. But a wild pigeon would scoot off from you in a second, right? So it's the same creature. They have the same brain. Have everything, right? And so certainly either one can learn in the same aspects, right? So this what I'm saying. It's just simply from things that they see. So I suspect the earliest stellar sea cows, they just never seen humans before, barely nothing. So they weren't that scared of them, right? But then after a couple speared and all that sort of stuff like that, well, then you start becoming more cryptid, right? And there's like sea monsters out there, several 100 feet long. There's been one that's been witnessed many, many times in this bay, right? And this thing, the mariners and stuff. And there's one good photograph of it coming up out of the water and clearly tell it's not a whale, right? And that sort of thing like that. And these guys said that it went past them and it was easily about 200 feet long, right? So there's giant things out in our oceans and all kinds of weird stuff that's out there that we're not aware of yet, right? Like I saw a whale. There's an excellent film and some clips of this whale that they found. I think he was like 40 some feet long or whatever. Something bit this dude in half in one bite. One bite. You see, even at the edge where some of its teeth, I guess, were sticking out more and they're like at different angles. I mean, any monster has that sort of thing. Lots of humans have messed up teeth too, right? So, I mean, that would be fully feasible. And you see these giant cuts all along it. And then idiots are saying it's a shark, right? Sharks don't, and that is like megalodonish sized shark bites, right? Not little great whiteys here. This is like whatever did this to this thing, right? And it couldn't have happened that previous long before it washed up on the shore because its guts and everything were hanging out. If that thing had been drifting for a day, a couple of days on the ocean floating around, right? The stench and the birds would have been ripping this to shred. All kinds of smaller, medium sized to large sharks would start showing up, and a host of other wacky predators that might float in on the action, right? That just will mysteriously, because they can smell this stuff, right? So they would have ripped all the guts out of this and everything. Something bit this dude in half, man. And there's a actual real film that some lady has, and you see this whale, and you see this some kind of giant worm-like head come out of the water and grab and bite this guy and attack him and drag him down, right? So there's even some quasi evidence, right? Like, I mean, you can't, it's very little, but I mean, there's enough witnesses out there. I've investigated old 1800s reports, 1700s, different ones of mariners seeing this giant worm like monster that will come up and eat whales and shit like that. So there's some wild stuff out there. Like I told you, the Tucalata monster, 100% that was a living dinosaur of some sort, right? Like it was 83 feet long. Part of its body was missing, was chopped off its tail. I interviewed a human being that actually watched this thing right when it was on the beach alive, squiggling and still had his big horn in its head. It was definitely some kind of weird, and it had big spikes on it and these giant scales. Then I interviewed another fellow that seen it after they sort of chopped the horn off, and then they chopped his head and stuff. He saw it when they were just doing that part of it or whatever, and he laughs like when and some of them they laugh at this, right? Like I mean, to say that it was a minke whale, I mean they only get
yeah, less than 30 feet typically, and that sort of thing like that. And so this creature is like almost 3 times longer, right? And with a part of his body missing. He has a head like a camel. The head is positioned completely different. He's got giant dragon like spikes on him and dragon like scales. His face and mouth is at a totally different angle position than any kinds of whales or anything. Complete BS, right? So, I mean, as say with the Newfoundland monster, that was some kind of mosasaurian sort of creature, right? So, I mean, there's wacky stuff that they claim they extinct millions of years ago. There's still floating out there. There's wacky stuff that nobody even knows about, like this guy here, right? And there's all kinds of things out in our oceans. Why anybody's skeptical of that, I find silly. I mean, it's less than 10% here is known of that's been explored out in the ocean, right? And you can't get to these depths. You have to be lucky enough that the camera's there right that second, and then half the people are still going to say it's CGI anyways, right? Like so, it's all like this, right? But here's what we'll continue on here. Okay, yeah, we'll cover another show on this, but a lot of people don't know this. There was like a beast de Jobadin like guy in Quebec as well, from the earliest like 15, 16, 1700s, all the way up, until the early 20th century, sort of things like that, of fairly common werewolf like sightings, right? And some of them being cannibals and eating people and things like that. In 1689 in Quebec City, a trapper was going along an island on the St. Lawrence River, and he heard these unearthly like howls out on this island, right? And it was a night, so he decided to approach it, and he dragged his canoe up in these reeds and kind of snuck up there, right? And that sort of thing like that. And then he saw this group of werewolves, and they were all circled around these seemingly two women, and they had devoured like ripped parts of their body off and everything, and that sort of thing. And they were right into that, so this guy just crawled backwards and jumped back into his canoe and played, right? There was a similar case on the Ottawa River, early trapper, I think also late 1600s, early 1700s. And the guy around Britannia Bay, where also a monster was seen and different things. But in early times, there was werewolves before they had, white people started taking it over, sort of idea, right? But one of the descriptions was very strange, where the guy came and they had this woman like on some kind of pit or something, and like barbecuing her and stuff. And these guys were like screaming and stuff. But what was weird is they took off like a pelt. One of the guys took a pelt off of his head, right? But he still looked like a furry werewolf underneath it, right? So this is really strange, right? Like so. There's some bizarre sort of ones out there that are interesting, right? That and in recent times, somebody shot a some bizarre hyena-ish with some kind of other mixture of a creature. It looks like a hyena a little bit, but it's not like any the regular a regular hyena. This is some crossbreed like bizarre thing, right? So this proves that such a creature exists, right? And this is what one of the suspects of was of the beast de Jobada, but also in Quebec City and in Montreal, there was multi murders that were blamed on werewolves, and even early newspaper reports of warning you about that there was being a werewolf always seen around in Montreal and stuff like that. So, you could take these things one way or the other, but the Beast of Jobada and these Quebec killings and many others out there of mysterious deaths, right, that were attributed from England, France, and other countries to werewolf like sort of guys here, right? There's something to it, right? Like for sure, right? I showed you in another show that early Quebec that was by the RCMP. They shot some kind of werewolf Bigfoot like creature, right? And I mean, it's really bizarre looking, like right out to lunch, right? So whatever this thing was, right? So yeah, very very interesting. But I mean, there is these stories, right? There's like the land between the legs, right? Like I mean, how more terrifying can you get than that one, right? And that sort of thing like that. So there's some messed up stuff out there that are really interesting, right? That with this werewolf phenomena and even great films of a giant wolves, like huge, way bigger than science accepts, right? So there is some out there that would be able to easily eat humans and that sort of thing like that. And if they're crazy enough, right, and that sort of thing like that. So there definitely is something to the werewolf phenomena. A lot of it is just giant wolves. Also, I believe a Sasquatch that have malformities, sort of thing like that. And it could be that there is really a bipedal unknown sort of wolf like humanish like a guy out there. I mean, that could be even to some part of it, right? So this, I wouldn't discount that 100%. It's feasible. I mean, Bigfoot can exist, other things, although lots of people argue that they do. But I mean, like even on the other show, there's a toe there is found in Washington State. Duh. I mean, it did belong to some giant guy, right? Like, I mean, I don't know what else it would have been, right? So, like, I mean, but anyways, yeah, that sort of thing like that. But these werewolf stories are interesting. I have a few other shows on these kind of things, more about them than that. These sightings have not ever stopped, right? So, there's things out there. And in my region, when it was all forested before, right, it was fairly common to still see these guys, right? Along the Ottawa River and the different things until modern society and everything got them out, right? Like and that sort of thing like that. But there's still reports in like not far off from here, like an hour, less than an hour's drive sort of stuff, right? You have like these Blue Sea Lake and all these other ones around in certain areas of Quebec. You have my buddy, the Beast of Schutz. Some other strange things out there that are werewolfy like, right? And that sort of thing like that too. That sort of thing, right? But anyways, just another interesting sort of tales that are out there that makes you really wonder what really some of the bizarre things that we don't have, I mean, floating around in our wildernesses and that it's boggles the mind. I won't have time to do the other Sasquatch films, so next show we'll have more cryptid cats, some more like monster films, some mystical items I still haven't covered. I had some other stories from New England and some other wacky stuff and that sort of thing like that. So, a bit of a shorter show. This one sort of as well as I wanted to cover way before crop circles and that. There was this guy in the 1800s that would like terrorize in England over, right? Very strange that they called him the mowing devil. So we'll talk about him and this sort of thing like that. That is quite interesting. So them and some other sort of things like that. But you can clearly see, especially that Sasquatch film, if you analyze everything about it, how this all occurred and everything, it's got way more pluses and minuses. And in the highest probability, it's an actual legitimate film of a real Sasquatch. So, way to go, young fellow, right? One of the few that has pulled it off, right? Very difficult to do. So, and that sort of thing like that. And some of these cryptids, you got to admit, are quite interesting. Oh yeah, and we didn't have time for the Trudeau, sort of the Minx Lake monster there. So we'll talk about the Minx Lake mermaid on the next show. So stay tuned.